Hello everyone. I thought it'd be fun to do the mid-year freakout tag and kind of go over what I read this year, what I thought was good, what I thought was not so good, as well as looking at my stats on the Storygraph, which is a great alternative to Goodreads, and it has a lot of fun data for you, pie charts, all that fun stuff. So let's get into it. So first we have my reading goal or reading challenge for the year, which is 50 books. The last 4 or 5 years I've just had it at 50 books because it's really more about the quality than the quantity, but I still like to know approximately where I'm at with my reading, so just setting a generic goal helps with that. So I've done 33 books so far this year out of 50, which is not too shabby. I haven't read as much as in previous years, definitely not as much as during the pandemic, but yeah, that's what it is. Next, we have moods. So there's a cool pie chart in Storygraph that tells you what you've been more in the mood with the books you've read. So my top 4 are reflective, informative, emotional, and inspiring. And that seems on par. I don't know if I was like specifically seeking those out, but I have read a lot more nonfiction this year, and I've been in like a not so great mood with work and the state of the world. So I definitely needed some inspiring and reflective stuff. Then pace, I'll include for you, but it's like, what is pace? It's kind of just an illusion to me, because you could say like a poetry collection's fast paced because it's short, but I find them slower just because you're like stopping to slow down, reread lines and really contemplate all that fun stuff, and so it ends up taking longer sometimes. So I think I ran out of space on my memory card, so that was fun. Back to it. So page number, so no surprise to me, but I read mostly books under 300 pages. 73% of my reading was that. Yeah, I just sometimes don't have the commitment level and focus and time needed for bigger books. I do read bigger books, but it just hasn't been in the cards this year. The fiction versus nonfiction, I found this a little bit interesting. I knew I was reading a lot of nonfiction, but I didn't realize that 69% of my reading was nonfiction, especially since I kind of, in my head, made the goal of reading more fiction. So I'm going to definitely see if I can change that up a little bit this second half of the year. And then genres, my top genres were memoir, self-help, poetry, fantasy, and format. This is going to be a little bit off because on Storygraph, not all of them, I was able to like select the correct formatting, but print books is 61, digital or ebooks is 21, and audio is 18. So the digital and audio would be a little bit higher if everything was recorded accurately, and that's definitely more than in past years. So yeah. And my most read authors is Natalie Goldberg, who I love to pieces, and Brene Brown, who is also great. I've read 5 Natalie Goldberg books, if that gives you any clue how much of a stan I am for her. And then next is like a little graph of my reading throughout each month, which is a bit misleading because I read around 2 to 5 books at any one time, and so I start them about the same time, and I just happen to finish them at about the same time. So there'll be like a really heavy peak as you see in like May, but it doesn't necessarily mean I did better or read more in May. It just means I finished a bunch at the same time. And star rating is around a 3.92, which is pretty awesome. I think I only have 1 book that was a 2-star, and I think I've just gotten a little bit better at pegging up really early on in a book if I'm gonna like it or not, and if I drop it really early on, I won't even bother putting like a DNF or like any sort of star rating, because I'm just like, not for me, and move on. I have to like get like 50 to 100 pages in for me to be like, I want a record of this, mainly just so that I know for future reference, oh, I gave that book a shot and it didn't pan out. Those are the ones from Storygraph, a little breakdown of my reading this year. And now I'm going to move on to the tag and the questions for the tag. FYI, I'm not including every question because I didn't have good answers to every question, and boring answers are boring. But let's get into it. Let me know again, what was your number 1 genre that you read this year? I'm curious to know. So question number 1, what is the best book you've read so far in 2022? I would say Pachinko by Lee Min-jin. This is a family saga starting in Korea during the Japanese occupation and leading up to modern day Japan as the family moves over there. and kind of the hardships and circumstances that they go through their personal individual life stories intermixed within this larger perspective of war, racism, oppression, globalization. And it's a historical fiction, which I normally don't gravitate towards, but it was so good. Not only was the plot good, but the prose was excellent. There were so many lines that like I had to stop and just marinate on. Best sequel you've read so far in 2022. So I've only read one sequel in 2022. It hasn't been a year of series for me, but it was a really good sequel, so I thought I'd bring it to your attention, which is City of Blades by Robert Jackson Bennett. And this is the sequel to City of Stairs, which is a fantasy spy thriller. And he took some really bold choices with this book because it's a different main character, also a different central city that it takes place in. And it's got some really interesting themes around war and what makes a soldier, and who we are after we've done horrible things. And yeah, I'm really excited for the third book. Solid read. Highly recommend the series. I hope that the last book holds up to the first two. Biggest disappointment. So, heavy words, but I will say it's probably American Cult, which is a graphic novel, which I don't have because I read it as an ebook, but I'll have it up. And it wasn't bad by any means, don't get me wrong, but I'm so fascinated with cults, and I read so many books on cults. I've seen so many documentaries about cults that when I saw that there was a graphic novel documenting all of these different cults in American history, I'm like, this was written for me. And it was kind of hit or miss. It was an anthology, so I guess I should have known better that I'd probably resonate with some for the writing and stories more than others. But some of them like really hit it out of the park, and some I was just like, okay, this is kind of like an illustrated Wikipedia article. Sorry. Was it a horrible book? No. But was I expecting a lot more given my interest in the subject material? Yes. Biggest surprise. Pachinko. For a lot of reasons. It's historical fiction, which I don't... Bleh. It's historical fiction, which I normally don't jam with. It is a cajillion pages long, which makes me a little scared in general. And then with it being historical fiction, I was like, oh no. And with it being a family saga, normally, I don't know, I find family sagas are too drawn out, and like too many of the characters, like I might like one character, but then the rest are kind of meh to me, but then I'm like forced to be with these other characters. And it was so well done. So good. I don't want to give anything away, but each character, even if you didn't like them, their perspective and their struggles and their story were interesting enough that you were curious to see how things went for them, as well as how their stories interconnected with the whole. Favorite new author, debut or new to you? I don't read a whole lot of debuts. I'm a cheapskate, so I wait for it to be used or at the library. But new to me, Lee Min-jin, which is the author of Pachinko. Oh my god, I'm mentioning it again. Can you tell that I liked it? I think she only has one other book, sadly, but it's definitely higher up on my list now to read. And I just can't wait to dig into that. Newest fave character. So I didn't really, like, I had to struggle with this a little bit because there wasn't one that I was just like dying allegiance to, but I will say that I cackled so much with Sophia from The Color Purple that like I was even just like, oh my god, she's my spirit animal. The fact that like she just takes no shit, and when her husband like starts to try to like force himself on her and control her, she just whoops his ass right back. Don't mess with Sophia. She will come for you. Book that made you cry. I'm a Pisces, so that's not too hard, but definitely Let the Whole Thundering World Come Home, a memoir by Natalie Goldberg. Natalie's my girl. And so it's a true story. So, I mean, already ripe for crying material. And essentially it's about how Natalie finds out that she has cancer. And shortly after, she finds out that her partner has cancer too. And kind of their journey going through that, and how it is so isolating in some ways because you're just so consumed with your own health and healing, and you just don't have the time and energy to help support someone else when you're going through your own cancer struggle, but also the humanity and support that comes to you through other people as you're going through that. So what a winner, but I definitely did cry. Book that made you happy. That would be In a Sunburned Country by Bill Bryson. This book made me smile so hard. It made me laugh out loud. Bill Bryson is a hoot, let me tell you. I believe he's American, but he spent quite a bit of time in England, so he's got like that fun mix of humor. And so it's his journey and travels through Australia. He inserts like quirky Australian history, little tidbits of culture and like dialogue, and he always bumps into the most interesting characters, and he just has an interesting perspective on the world that just makes you laugh because he just notices things that not everyone would. And I just had such a good time reading this, and I'm one who is very intentional about the books I keep, and that this is definitely one of them because I can see myself coming back and rereading this and just having a fun time with my boy Bill. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? So normally this wouldn't be a question that I answer because I don't really put pressure on myself to read certain types of books or certain, like, TBRs don't really work for me. They're kind of optional. So it's like, I don't need to read anything. However, in this case I do, because I've borrowed 2 books from my friend and it's been ages and I probably need to read them and give them back. And that is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa and IQ 84 by Haruki Murakami. And these are both books that weren't at the library or on my library apps. And so if I want to read them, I need to either buy them or borrow them. Didn't know if I would love them, so I would rather borrow them first. And my friend was happy to loan them to me. So I would like to finish these and eventually give them back to her. For those who don't know, The Memory Police is, I guess you would say, it's dystopian. It's translated Japanese fiction. It's kind of an Orwellian style story about an island where objects and their names and their connotations are kind of erased from the population's memory over time. And so I thought that'd be an intriguing read. And then IQ 84 is also kind of Orwellian inspired, and it you know, it's a chunker. Oh man. And it's a love story, a mystery, a fantasy, a novel of self-discovery, a dystopia to rival George Orwell's, and is a tremendous feat of imagination from one of our most revered contemporary writers. And I think I read one nonfiction by Haruki Murakami, and I read After the Quake, I think, which was a small short story collection. So I haven't really jumped in to Haruki Murakami's work, especially his novels. So thought I'd give this a gander. So there you have it. That is my mid-year freakout tag, as well as some stats from Storygraph. Let me know down below if you have any fun answers to these questions. What's the best book you read this year? What's the worst book you read this year? And all that in between down below. Please like and subscribe for more. Lets me know that I'm on the right track, and I'll see you next time. Bye!